So it's time for the NBA Nerd Dream Series. The Celtics and the Raptors. Nick Nurse and Brad Stevens. Jason Tatum and Pascal Siakam has become a bit of an argument. Full transparency, for the sake of whatever, I'm a Celtics fan. I've picked them to lose in the past, and maybe I'll end up picking them to lose this series. But I don't know. I think that's worth mentioning. So the first thing I want to talk about is the clear advantage Toronto has in terms of depth. Their starting five is rock solid. Lowry, although Lowry does have an ankle thing right now, we're going to have to see with that. But you imagine Lowry, Van Fleet, Anunoby, Siakam, Marc Gasol. Off the bench, they have two guys who would start on a lot of teams. Norman Powell, who, depending on when you were paying attention throughout the season, looked like a 20-point scorer. And Serge Ibaka, who is one of the more two-way big guys who can stretch out to three and stuff in the NBA. Compare that to the Celtics, where the second they go to the bench, there's a pretty obvious drop-off in talent, especially with Gordon Hayward out. I think that's going to matter. I mean, I think the Celtics starters are going to have to play a lot of minutes in this series, and I do think when you're just comparing the Celtics starters to the Raptors, I think Boston has, a real chance here. But it's like, once you start going to Wanamaker and Grant Williams and Semi Ojeleye and Enes Kanter and all these guys, I don't trust any of these guys in this series. Whether it's the Raptors are going to leave Ojeleye and Grant Williams and Wanamaker just kind of open, even if Wanamaker can make some open threes occasionally. And you just compare that to how hard the Celtics are going to have to work to go at the 6th and 7th guys on the Raptors bench. And even then, Terrence Davis is a solid two-way guy. Matt Thomas is a shooter. I just think that matters within this whole thing. And Powell and Ibaka give Toronto so much versatility because, there's Ibaka and Siakam. There's potentially Ibaka, Gasol, and Siakam together. Norman Powell can come in there if Van Fleet's struggling or if Anunoby is struggling. Like, the Raptors' margin for error is a lot bigger than the Celtics, I would say. Now if we move on to the matchups. I'm not totally confident what the matchups are going to be. I mean, I know the starting fives, but if we start with who the Raptors are going to put on who on defense, so I don't know who they're going to put on Tatum, whether it's Anunoby or Siakam. I mean, my pick would be Anunoby, but it could be Siakam. They're both big enough to do it. I think when you're talking about Kemba, it's probably Lowry on him, but it could be Van Fleet. And then I guess you're picking the other guard to defend Marcus Smart. The interesting thing that I've got is, could Toronto have a thing where Siakam and Anunoby are defending Jalen and Tatum in whichever combination you want to think of? I feel like Siakam can handle that. Like, if Siakam is on Jalen, I don't think it's a problem. In fact, it's kind of scary thinking about it for Jalen. Or Siakam could be on Tatum, Anunoby could be on Jalen. I don't know. I'm just spitballing here. But those are going to be some big, long, experienced defenders that Tatum and Jalen are going to have to deal with. And I'm imagining that Tatum can still get his shots off and stuff, but those step-back threes and the screens where the defender just was out of the play against Philly, I don't think that's going to happen against Toronto. I mean, I know Tatum had Thibault on him sometimes, but I think while Thibault's potential defensively is very high and all that, I think right now Anunoby and Siakam are better defenders than him. And of course they're bigger. So we're just going to have to see how Tatum deals with that. I mean, is he going to be able to still get by guys? Sure. The next question is, when the Raptors are not defending Daniel Tice, when they're not defending Marcus Smart, is Tatum going to be able to make plays? Because he's not going to have all the room in the world to operate like he had against Philly. Even if the Celtics do an okay job of spacing the floor, the Raptors are probably the best team in the league at bringing extra defenders and then closing out to shooters. And Tatum, to me, has not proven to be a good enough playmaker to where he can see what the defense is going to do, get it to the open guy within a matter of, 4 seconds or something. I mean, if he can do that in 3 or 4 seconds, they're going to get open shots. If he does it in 7 seconds, then the play is basically dead. And Toronto is just so good at pressuring ball handlers like that. The other thing to talk about, because the Celtics, they love the pick and rolls, and they love just sometimes some simple ISO plays, but we'll talk about the pick and roll. All of the easy shots that Kemba got against Philly, Tatum got against Philly, those aren't going to be there as much. Because for one, I think Marc Gasol will step up on screens. Toronto's not just going to run a lazy drop defense. I mean, if they run a drop, they're also going to have the primary defender fight over the screen or go under the screen super quickly, to where they kind of shade the ball handler one area and they kind of force you into an uncomfortable mid-range as opposed to a 15-footer or sometimes a 3 where you've got all the time in the world to gather your shot up and stuff. So how are the Celtics going to deal with that? Well, I think Stevens, he's going to have his off-ball brand of tricks, which the Raptors can switch a lot of. I mean, I guess if Van Fleet is on Tatum, they'll probably have some success there. I mean, Van Fleet's a good defender, but at a certain point, size is size, you know. With Lowry, it's a little different because Lowry is effectively like 6'6", because the guy's a brick wall. And if I haven't mentioned it again, the Raptors they're going to dare Marcus Smart to make shots. We'll see if he does. They're not going to defend Tice at all. And when you give that defense one guy they can definitely not defend when he's sitting on the perimeter, and Tice does spend a good amount of time at the three-point line, and one guy who they can kind of leave open with Marcus Smart, we'll see how it goes. His three-point shooting has been better. That's going to be tough. I mean, their defense is really good, even if you do have shooting everywhere. And I mentioned Tatum's potential problems as a passer. I'm going to do the same thing with Jalen, but I think with Jalen, it's a little scarier. I mean, is Jalen going to be able to just beat these guys off the dribble like that? When you got all these arms swiping at you and stuff. I mean, Jalen's ball handling has improved, but is he on that level? I don't know. Should also be mentioned that just in general, you can beat these guys off the dribble, and you still have Marc Gasol to deal with at the rim. And, you know, we don't think of Marc Gasol as one of the best rim protectors in the NBA, and I don't know why. I mean, I kind of get it. You know, he's not really like a shot blocker like that. He doesn't have crazy chase downs or whatever. But he's big, he's fundamental as hell, and he knows what he's doing. I mean, he's Marc Gasol. We all get it. So for what that's all worth, and I mean, when Ibaka plays center, they're still good defensively and stuff. So yeah, basically, I think Toronto is equipped to slow down what the Celtics are doing. I think the loss of Hayward is definitely going to be a big deal here, because when the Raptors are really going defensively, and it seems like they're five guys with one brain, and they know how to help, and they know where to close out without even talking to each other, it seems. It just really would have been nice to have another guy who could go off the dribble, make a shot, and also make whatever the next play is, because Toronto forces you to make these split-second decisions, and it's tough. Now, for all the nice things I will say about the Raptors' defense, their offense was not overall amazing this year. They were 14th in offensive rating. They did have injuries. That should be pointed out. But I do think the Celtics' defense can give Toronto problems as well. As far as the matchups, I'm guessing you put Tatum on Siakam, although part of me is interested to see if Stevens wants to try Marcus Smart on Siakam, and then you can go Tatum and Jalen on Lowry and Van Fleet, with Kemba defending Anunoby. I don't know if he can really do that. I don't know if he's going to try to go with the Smart on Siakam thing, but it would be interesting to see, because then you've got a huge size advantage over the Raptors guards. I would assume Jalen on Siakam is possible as well. I think what realistically is going to happen is it's going to be Tatum on Siakam, Jalen on one of Lowry and Van Fleet, and then Marcus Smart on the other guard, which even still then, I think you're forcing Lowry and Van Fleet to have to deal with some stuff and force them to get by defenders who are very good. I mean, Jalen is much bigger than Lowry and Van Fleet. And I give Lowry credit for being able to play above his size on defense, but on offense, it's a little tougher. Same thing with Van Fleet. And then, of course, Marcus Smart is Marcus Smart. So if the Celtics are going to win this series, I think that's the key. It's that those two guards, Lowry and Van Fleet, are just overwhelmed by the Celtics' size. The interesting thing about Toronto is that they don't run much pick and roll. In the regular season, they were fourth least in pick and roll frequency, if that made sense. And then in the playoffs, the only team that's run less pick and rolls than them is the Pacers. So mainly where the Raptors get their offense in the half court is handoff plays and flare screens and pin downs. And typically it's like the guy gets the screen, he gets some momentum, and then off of that, he's able to go to the rim or whatever. It's not a whole lot of just Gasol screening for Van Fleet, Ibaka, or Siakam screening for Lowry or whatever. I'm not saying they'd never do it, but it's not their go-to. Are the Celtics just going to switch everything? Well, the fear there is Kemba. I think if you just want to do a switch all, then the Raptors could certainly find ways to attack Kemba. An interesting thing, because I'm assuming Kemba's going to be on Anunoby. Maybe he won't start the series on Anunoby, but I think he's going to end up there. Is Anunoby going to be able to beat Kemba at all? Can Anunoby post him up? Can Anunoby overwhelm him with size in any way? Or is Anunoby just going to average 6 points a game in the series? I don't think that's the most important thing, but I think it kind of matters. Now, if Anunoby's offense proves to just not be good enough, you can go to Powell, and suddenly it's like, wait, we legitimately have nowhere to hide Kemba. So that's kind of scary. Now, Brad Stevens has done a great job of having a good defense with defenders who are not so good. Biggest example being the Isaiah Thomas years. So we'll see. I think another interesting subplot of how the Celtics are going to defend the Raptors is how much are they going to care about Marc Gasol. Gasol's three-point shooting, pretty good. 39% on 3 a game in the 40 games he played in the regular season. The playoffs, it's a very small sample size of 4 games, but he wasn't good from outside, for whatever that's worth. I don't know. I think depending on the day, Marc Gasol is going to kill you with a couple threes. Sometimes he won't. I think the Celtics are going to gamble on that. I think they're also going to gamble on being able to not have to totally defend Anunoby like that, which again goes back to the idea of, well, is Anunoby going to make them pay it somewhat offensively? The counter here, though, besides what I just said, Powell with Anunoby, is you could go to Ibaka, who is more threatening of a shooter. I think will shoot it more than Gasol will. Not as good of a passer. And if Ibaka's out there, you can dare him to be a playmaker. And I think Ibaka, he's made a little bit of improvement there, but he's still kind of immobile on offense sometimes. Specifically with the ball. Like, he's pretty okay at rolling and popping and all that stuff. Another big part of the Raptors' scoring is transition. They use that defense to get out on the break quite a lot. And I would imagine the Celtics can keep up with that. Now, the fear with that is even if you can keep up with them there, it can create mismatches at the same time. So Kemba could end up on Siakam or something, and that's an obvious post up or face up or whatever for Siakam. I guess I should talk about Siakam a little bit more. Is Siakam ready to be really, really good? I mean, I do think this idea of him being the leading force of the Raptors has been a little overblown. Like, Lowry and Van Fleet really stepped up in other things this season. But Siakam is the leading scorer. He did take the most shots. And while his his improvement as a ball handler and as a contested three-point shooter and stuff, that's all improving. I think a lot of the things I said about Tatum and Jalen, I'm going to say about Siakam as well. I mean, when the Raptors' offense slows down, because it will at times, is Siakam going to be able to bail them out of that? And while the Raptors, of course, do have a lot of shooting, the Celtics are still going to find ways to bring some extra guys on him. I mean, for everything I say about how Toronto can collapse on a ball handler and still close out to shooters, the Celtics are pretty good at that as well. And while I said earlier that the Raptors don't like to run pick and roll after pick and roll, they're still going to do it sometimes. And I feel like if you put Jalen and Marcus Smart on Lowry and Van Fleet, and then they start having plays with Siakam, it kind of forces a matchup that you're okay with on both sides, right? Like now it's Tatum on Lowry or Van Fleet, assuming Tatum is defending Siakam initially, and then it's Marcus Smart or it's Jalen on Siakam, and yeah, I'll take that if I'm the Celtics. This is, of course, assuming they switch, which it's not a guarantee that they will. But I have to imagine the Celtics are going to be ready for Siakam's spin moves and all that stuff. And they've got the defenders to deal with it, so is Siakam just going to be okay at that? I mean, is Siakam going to be able to operate when the open guy is in the opposite corner and he's just made his initial move and now Marcus Smart's closing out on him or Jalen's coming at him and Tatum's already on him or whatever combination you want to think of? I think the infrastructure of Toronto is good enough to where they're not going to put too much on one person's plate offensively. Like, if that's happening, they'll tell Siakam, all right, swing it to the perimeter, and then we'll hopefully get it to the guy in the corner, or we'll at least get the Celtics defense chasing, and then somebody's going to get an open shot off of that. Like, it's two very smart teams here. I think something that's super obvious, but sometimes goes under the radar with all this as well, is who's just simply going to make threes as well. I mean, there's going to be a good amount of them attempted this series. Is Lowry going to be shooting threes off of screens? Is Van Fleet going to be doing the same thing? Or are the Celtics going to give up some of those shots? I guess I should mention some of the other guys on these teams a little bit and see if anybody could make an impact. I mean, I do want to mention Marcus Smart a little bit more. He's going to do something crazy in every game of this series, whether it's some wild rebound or he'll probably have like a 5 for 10 from 3 game. He's usually good for one of those. And I have mentioned already the potential of him on Siakam, which, again, I don't know if they're going to try it, but I think it's something that could end up being a thing. For Toronto, there's Terrence Davis, who has been pretty damn solid all season on both sides of the floor. You've got Matt Thomas, who, I don't know if Matt Thomas is really going to play, but he's a shooter. Guy likes to take his shots, and they've encouraged him to do it. Rondé Hollis-Jefferson, is he going to play any small ball 5? He's done that a bit this season. Is Chris Boucher going to come in and do some weird defense with his alien arms? Although the Celtics are not going to defend Chris Boucher if he's in there. Similar things for Rondé. For the Celtics side of things, I mean, I mentioned Wanamaker. I think the Raptors could really pressure Wanamaker, and I mean, he's fundamentally okay. He's not that good of a ball handler for a point guard, so I think if you crowd him a bit or you just put a tough defender on him, I think he could have a tough time. They're not going to defend Grant Williams. They're not going to defend Semi Ojeleye. They're going to attack Cantor, I would assume, and I think they're going to have some success. Although, I do think Cantor can be okay at just being physical around Gasol and Ibaka, whoever he ends up getting matched up with. But even then, if Ibaka's popping out to 3, I think Cantor could definitely have some trouble there. Now, Grant Williams was making some threes against the Sixers, for whatever that's worth. Is there any potential for the Celtics to go small ball here? The chances are lower without Hayward, but could we see a Tatum, Jalen, Smart, Kemba, Grant Williams at center type of thing for a little bit? Yeah, probably. I wouldn't be shocked by it. I don't think any of the Raptors, well, Siakam, yes, but besides him, like Gasol and Ibaka, I think you're willing to dare those guys to beat you on the post a little bit. I mean, Gasol of a few years ago, you wouldn't, but at this point, I think you could try it. And Ibaka, probably a similar thing. One little teeny subplot that may not matter at all is the Celtics' offensive rebounding. Could be a thing. They were one of the better offensive rebounding teams in the league. I think Cantor has a lot to do with that, and I don't know if he's going to be able to play like that in the series, but for what it's worth, that could be a little bit of a thing. Is Daniel Tice going to be a big impact guy in the series? I guess if his threes are dropping, which I don't expect, but besides that, I expect him to just do normal Daniel Tice things, be okay enough on defense, switch occasionally, and just kind of fit within Brad Stevens' scheme and, just do that, basically. Am I ready for a prediction 20 minutes in? Yeah, I think, again, Lowry, he's got an ankle thing, we don't know. And Hayward also has an ankle thing, but we do know he's not going to be out there. I think I'm going to go with the Raptors. I would love to be wrong as a Celtics fan, but I think the loss of Hayward, and with how good Toronto is defensively, and shortening a Celtics rotation that already wasn't that big outside of the starting five, well, and Marcus Smart, so 6 guys, I just think it's going to be too much to ask of all these guys. I mean, they're going to have to play so many minutes. They're going to have to be really good, and I just think Toronto's going to wear them down. That being said, still tough. And I do think the potential size advantage of the Celtics on the perimeter could be a real thing. I think if Smart can defend Siakam, that could be huge. So yeah, I'm going to go with the Raptors. As a Celtics fan, I hope I'm wrong, but it's just what I'm thinking.